this September 15th, 2022 Climate Action Committee Executive Committee meeting to order. The first item of business this evening, I move that the Executive Committee approve the August 2nd, 2022 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Schultz. Any discussion needed? No? In that case, I call the question on all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. The August 2nd, 2022 Executive Committee minutes are approved. Are there any members of the public online? As I can see, there are none in person. Seeing none. Okay, we'll move on to introductory remarks. I have a few things to update the committee and the general public. So we have begun well, actually, we're more than begun. We've identified the data crunchers who are going to collaboratively work on our newest greenhouse gas inventory for municipal operations to complement our current community greenhouse gas inventory. And I know Jared got to introduce himself to that group of students, and they are eagerly looking forward to getting started on that process. We should have I do have control over the delivery date of that product, and we should have it by early November. We may have reason to refine a few things, but it should be essentially completed and ready to go, certainly by the end of November. So I appreciate everybody who's standing by to work with those students. We have a total of 9, as it turns out, graduate students, and in addition to the clear path number crunching, they're also going to individually help us think through some strategies for improving our to reach our objectives and reducing our footprint on municipal operations. So I will obviously make that available to the committee here and to staff. So I look forward to hearing some of their thoughts. I had I've been working a little bit with Department of Environmental Protection, who has sort of evolved their local climate action planning program, of which most of us know we were the first plank owner cohort to get our community greenhouse gas funded and kind of get us started on our climate action plan. The state has subsequently sort of turned those, what I would call climate action planning, greenhouse gas inventory duties over to Penn State University, basically provided them funding to continue to work with the municipalities to do what we did. And DEP is now focused on implementation. Wants to spend most of their funding that they get from the Department of Energy on helping municipalities like ours actually get to the next phase for those who have climate action plans to do implementation. They have a program they've created for that. It's called the Shared Energy Manager Program. You can find it on their website, although it has not a lot of detail associated with it. Again, they've gotten funding from out of the state energy program that comes out of the federal Department of Energy to help municipalities reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Why do we care? The reason I bring that up is we have been penciled in to actually be part of the next round of Shared Energy Management Program. And what that does is that allows the state to fund and subsidize a particular project or projects that we identify to in our climate action plan, and it could be an audit, it could be research, it could be a wide number of things. We identify it. Basically, DEP agrees, and we're off and running, and they'll help us again with an implementation project. So more to come on that. I bring that up because there's not a form, as I understand, there's not a formal request project. There's not a form, we don't put it in as a applicant. They sort of take them ad hoc, but we meet the requirements for being eligible for this, and I would expect us probably within the next 4 or 5 months to be thinking about what projects we would like the state to help us either research or analyze. And again, it comes back to implementation of one of our climate action plan objectives. So, I could see the ones that we're currently working on certainly being a candidate, but we've got a pretty wide range of projects we haven't really started with, and so we'll want to have an agenda item or two to think about where we might want to direct those efforts. So more on that later. I did drop in our shared drive. I think most of you now have gotten used to our new host location on the Carlisle's SharePoint site, but there is a little bit of information there on the Shared Energy Manager program, and it. I will just say the requirements of who they work with are pretty general. They say it could be a borough manager, it could be a climate action plan, climate action committee member, it can be a sustainability director. They actually use those words. But just like the LCAP program, we're going to have to provide a point of contact, and they're pretty flexible about who that is, and we don't need to decide that now, but there are no intractable requirements for staff to necessarily have to be the point of contact. So we can cross that bridge when we get there. So, all right, enough on that. I will also mention that there was, well, I did, maybe we'll get back to the, I saw some dialogue between David and Mitch about this next item. I know that David's task force is doing a lot of proactive outreach, really literally calling up business owners and developers and saying, hey, we are looking to really evolve our EV infrastructure, and businesses are a big part of that. And we've had a pretty, for the level of resources we have, we've had a pretty good response. I do feel, and I can say, I'd love to get everyone's thoughts on this, but I think we're probably not too far from probably warning a public meeting and inviting business owners, and I might even open that up to multi-family housing, commercial buildings whose primary purpose is renting, commercial with a small c, inviting them to hear their thoughts about, as we're moving forward, what are some of the considerations, and I think we could probably come up with a pretty good list of things that we want to be informed of, but I think one of them is certain coverage areas. Are there concerns about the aesthetics, right, of charging stations? Are there locations that business owners might generally think are more favorable to either at public locations, but also to incentivize maybe easements, where we think they would be of most benefit to our business community. That would be the primary purpose of the meeting, and be kind of a first call to get business thoughts. And I'll shut up for a second. Any thoughts about how we might, or when we should look forward to doing that? Yeah, Dave.
Our efforts have not been heroic by any means, but we're not making much progress. I've talked to a developer who's very busy, and we've said, well, we'll have a beer and talk about it, but I haven't heard from him again. I can't seem to get through to get returns. My email is a Gmail. My phone number is, it's just Dave Sheridan leaving a phone message. One of the task force members approached a friend who's a member of the congregation at First Lutheran, and the friend says, "No, I don't think anybody's thinking about that." So we're not. I sent an email to the info at Alliance Church, because they've got a good sized parking lot, and haven't heard anything back. So I'm wondering how to step it up and maybe make it more borough official instead of Dave Sheridan at Gmail. So I like this idea of doing something.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit more curious about like the specifics of it, just so it's sort of like when we approach these businesses, like are we asking them to front any money for these charging stations? Like what burden is being placed on them? Also like what exactly, like, I guess, I'm assuming that the borough has control over like street parking. Is that correct, or am I like wrong to assume that, or is that sort of something where we still want permission of the businesses and property owners that sort of like are in front of those street parking spaces?
Probably both.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both are true.
Okay. And then I guess, like sort of what are we looking at? I guess then, like, how much are we like looking at trying to get I guess what are we adding in addition to sort of like getting these businesses to put these charging stations in, like, regarding like federal funding, or it seemed like that was mostly reserved for level 3 charging stations, or the fast charging stations.
Yeah, well, a lot has changed since the Inflation Reduction.
Okay.
The opportunities have greatly expanded, but couple responses is, there are I think there are questions we can develop before we would hold a meeting like this that we would like to understand. Certainly, I would like to understand the barriers. I think the most important thing I would, like to know is what activities could we in the borough look at doing that would change their behavior. There are no barriers to there's nothing keeping a business from, putting a charging station there. Would some assistance in putting charging stations make the difference for some businesses? I would collectively like to know where they think, in terms of public locations, where would be the most favorable for them. But I also think it's the start of a dialogue. I mean, and I think, David, there probably is worth thinking about putting this, talk more with Mayor Schultz, but this might be worthy of, we have many sorts of public meetings for deliberation on lots of things from zoning, and this might be worth one to have as a public meeting to provide input. First of all, let those who might not be aware that we actually have a planning deliberative committee that's looking at these issues. One, that would be nice. But then this to begin, to allow them to know that, hey, we're not taking actions. It's not the government coming in telling everybody where the best locations are, that we actually do depend on them to help us think through our strategy. So I don't know, Mayor Schultz, do you have any strong thoughts about, or any weak thoughts about this?
Or somewhere in between.
Okay.
And sorry if I'm repeating myself. I can't remember if we've discussed this before, but my experience with, and maybe it was after the meeting, with engaging the business community is you need to you have to have sort of personal contact with the business owner to draw them into anything. They're busy. And you'll find that, probably telling you things that you already know, the time that they have is dependent on the industry that they're in. So restaurateurs, mornings are going to be better for them. Retailers, evenings are generally better. So you're trying to find a sweet spot, or maybe you're holding a couple different sessions to bring them in. But the blast emails, I'm a business owner. I get some of those, and I'm like, I don't have time for that right now. Maybe I'll respond to it later, and by the time later comes around, I've forgotten about it, right? Or I shouldn't say blast emails, but even the individual emails, especially if it's somebody I don't know. So having that personal contact with them, finding a sweet spot for a meeting, and having a real good sense, I think, to Mitch's point, what the agenda is, or what's going to be expected of the business owner in that meeting. I mean, the other way to do it is to, do it individually and reach out to them, sit them down, like, here are the questions we have, and interview them. That's going to be time consuming. I think that's really the best way to get at it. During the early part of the pandemic, Councilor Hicks will recall, we held a meeting of businesses trying to get their input on the early impacts of the pandemic. What can we do to help you out? And I think I scheduled that on a Thursday or Friday morning at like 9:30, 10 a.m., something like that. And I could get most of them. I got 40 to 50 businesses on the Zoom. That's another option. I mean, try to bring a Zoom together for them if you want to get that input from them.
I guess I would just say, I think it would be helpful to be able to say what we can do, and but by that I just mean what sorts of, even if it's not resources, what sort of information can we provide to business owners that would be helpful to them to, so I'm almost thinking as a first step before a broader public hearing where we invite a lot of folks to, it may be more effective to work with 2 or 3 local businesses that we know have parking lots, have shown some interest, work with them, whether that's greasing the wheels on getting access to incentives and rebates that Pennsylvania or the Federal Department of Energy has available for them to install these chargers, and kind of use those 2 or 3 kind of what would hopefully be success stories as a way of them reaching out to the community more broadly to say, look, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, here's what was successful in these couple of instances. I don't know. I feel like then it would be a little more appealing instead of I don't know, as someone who does too many brainstorming sessions in my day job, I think, it would be better to have a clear ask
100%.
or something. Yeah.
Anthony, I think, it's really kind of difficult to go to the public with these sort of vague sort of gestures of what we want to do, and then sort of like they're kind of like looking at it like, they don't have a lot of people don't have experience with trying to like build sustainability, at least in the way we're talking about it, into their business. They have in other ways, but it's sort of this thing where it's like we can bring these up, but it's like people are just like, but how? And it's sort of this thing where there's not enough for them to sort of go off of to get started with in terms of like questioning what we're trying to do, or like trying to help develop those avenues further. And I think that's really critical to sort of getting, even if somebody sort of like is complaining about it, at least we're getting sort of input in areas that we might need to think about more or try to resolve better.
Another option I just thought of while those comments were being made is DCA. There's a pretty good cross section of downtown businesses. At least they those meetings, and I'm the borough's voting member to that board, are the second Friday of the month, and we could probably work in when they have some agenda time, have you come in, and you might be able to get a bit of a brainstorming session. We want to prep them for that. I think to those points again, let them know what's coming in, so they can start to do. For those who look at their materials beforehand, start to have some thought on the issue. Too. But you have business owners from throughout the downtown, across all the industries.
David, you would know this better, but it seems to me it would be an easier ask for like local businesses that are not corporations, right? That have parking lots as a place to start, right? Rather than have to deal with street parking. And I think street parking has to be part of the story eventually, but it seems like it would be an easier, both for us and for them, if like, hey, here's these, 3 spots in your lot, can we get chargers at them? And what can we do to help?
I have a tentative appointment with Steve Capone, and Caprice owns a lot of the buildings along West High. He's just busy. He's got tax issues and such with with his day job, and but I could get Steve to a meeting with 1 or 2 other businesses, but I don't know who to ask, and I don't know them personally. So, is there a way to get 1 or more additional businesses, or one of the churches? For First Lutheran has a huge parking lot.
In the context of, as what I'm sort of interpreting as a pilot project or a pilot customer. Well, I think it's, I don't want to go too long on this. I would encourage you to follow up on Mayor Schultz's recommendation to see if we can get at least a discussion item on the DCA's agenda, saying, hey, we're looking into this. If we first of all, everybody should know David and know if this is an area of interest to them, they should contact him directly. But more, maybe leave it at that. More to follow. One of the things that weighs a little bit on my thinking, though, is I think it's important that we begin to get deliver to council some things to really have them deliberate about. And if we collectively think the best use of potentially borough funds that could come from a lot of sources is to learn from a series of sort of pilot projects. One avenue we could pursue is to develop basically a proposal for businesses, commercial entities who are interested in exploring or developing EV charging infrastructure. That we have a range of funding that we would consider. We could have council evaluate. We could recommend that council approve a limited number of projects, perhaps under a certain cap that we think is appropriate. And David, I would lean to you. I think I've kind of asked your team to think about what your strategies would be for different sizes of subsidies, but ultimately we would probably lean heavily on which proposals would be most appropriate for council to consider. That is one approach, and I kind of call that a learning as we go approach, rather than a very specific, we're gonna attack the R2 district and we're gonna meet all of our expected charging stations, and we already think we know what we're doing. Like that is an approach, but learning what we may find that there are some codes issues, or there's some things we're not even aware of that we didn't realize are barriers that folks who are part of this pilot program would help us flesh out and understand a little bit better. Is that an approach that looks maybe near term to be what would be in favor of? And this is outside of other things you're looking more on. You're looking at things on the public lots and parking, but in terms of really incenting getting the business and commercial entities in charge is maybe looking at it as a pilot program with a sort of a cap that the borough would potentially be able to help with.
Sure. I guess I'm curious, like, not to put any more pressure on Dave, but where are we with like placing charging stations on borough lots? Like, is that something
we're going to go through? Like, that is on the schedule.
Oh,
so yeah,
tonight.
I look forward to
Good.
hearing.
Yeah,
and David's
sorry,
team has given a few updates, but no, that might be helpful too as we move.
So I guess one of the first things we need to know then is what kind of money are we talking about here? David, maybe you can. And I skimmed through your notes from your meeting with your team. I know you talked to Ken Schultes about Dickinson's new chargers, and maybe we can willing to share some project costs with us. At kind of that, it's at the parking lot level at a facility like that, and how easy or difficult it is to kind of get that onto that business's. What's not clear to me is the kind of the technical engineering part of it, right? Is how is it connected to? Is it on the business's meter? Does it have its own meter? How do we, those types of details are the things I think we would want to know before we approach a business with a pilot program and say, okay, here's what we would need from you. Here's what we could provide to you. Here's a sense of cost per charger. So I don't know.
It would also be, I think one more reason to expedite the sort of borough lot charging stations is that we could get data off of usage for those, so that we can, if we then go to businesses, it's sort of like, hey, this is like, these are maybe being used a ton, like people are pulling up and we don't have enough charging spots, and we want them to park at local businesses and be patrons at those businesses, and
the learning, this is what we had to do, and this is how much they cost, and this is how we set them up in our services, and blah, blah, blah.
Tony, a data point, is Dickinson spent $40,000 on 3 cords, 3 charging stations, and they got a lot of that defrayed by driving PA forward.
So 3
So-
stations, but you can charge 2 off of 1 station.
Yeah, so it's 15,000 or so, and of course a lot's going to depend on how far away the electric power is. If it's at a light pole, that it's just going to be bringing the power down the pole. But
Let me add. To answer Tony's question, the answer is you can select any of a number of models of how you want to do it. You can own it. You can basically have a third-party provider. These all make, I think, sense in different scenarios. I might caution us a little bit to apply what we learn in terms of publicly provisioned EV chargers as to, whether that approach is the same one we would want to apply to commercial. So, for third-party providers, it's about getting enough people to charge. They know exactly how many people need to use their charging station to make it economical. I think the considerations for us are a little bit more broad in the sense of it has to do with access, it has to do with availability, not maybe exclusively about utilization rates. Those are important. In my mind, I sort of separate a little bit about the considerations for publicly provisioned spots and private ones. And, I think it's incumbent on anybody who would submit any pilot proposal that would be partially funded by the borough to have done their homework. We are not EV charging stations are us. That we are not. We're learning along the way, and if somebody is serious about thinking this is good for their business and might be nudged to do so with the potential of working with the borough to perhaps offset some of this, I would expect them to have done their own research and provide, a good set of criteria that would be useful for us to make a good decision, which we will all collectively learn from. I think one of the provisions we would certainly want is that they would share. We want to learn. I'm not as interested in funding projects where I don't learn from it, especially if it's going to be called a pilot project. So these are things we can think about if that's the direction we want to go in terms of our maybe first, I call them sort of first transportation funding project that we might want to consider to put forward to council. Do you think you have enough, David, to think about it, kind of a one-pager about how we might want to, what an RFP might look like that we can start to work with in view of sort of what we've been talking about?
an RFP,
A request for proposal.
inviting a property owner to.
That would be a solicitation for anybody who falls under sort of the commercial business property owner to respond to that we feel would meet the requirements and intentions of our learning and also meeting our objectives.
Yes. As a matter of fact, one of the concerns I've had is that we need some procedure that doesn't appear that we're just simply choosing somebody. So,
well, that's the benefit of an RFP. So we would have a period of response. And, I could not even guess how many people might respond to it. It's probably going to be dependent on what available funds could be to offset a project cost. Again, that kind of gets back to, I sort of leave it to your team to do that balance. In your mind, what's the minimum number of amount of data that we feel like we would need to really feel confident about next steps? What do we really want to learn being a partner who's interested in a pilot plant. So, yeah, so a deadline, and we'll see if we get some responses. And yeah, thanks. I thought now we just go. Thanks for having a good discussion. Thanks for everyone's input on that. Kind of go through our SharePoint site here where we're tracking our schedule, and I know this, hopefully you all can kind of read this. I've done my best to sort of put either research or projects that I've seen you all submit into this format. I will continue to update this as diligently as I can, but if you see any grotesque errors, you can correct me. But David, I'll just scroll through here. I think I have most of the projects you have included in some form on your updates in the appropriate sections. I know you have Jeff looking at the Pomfret Street Garage feasibility for an EV hub, and that's sort of ongoing. I will ask maybe Jared. I know there has been both discussions of utilization of the top part of the lot for potentially meeting EV charging infrastructure goals, but I know there's also been some discussion about potentially using it as a green roof or some sort of reducing the impervious surfaces up there. But has the borough, do you think it's their intent to kind of have a proposal of how they would repurpose the top of the lot? I mean, is that an ongoing study, or is that still generally kind of just discussion going back and forth? I'm not sure.
I don't know a whole lot about it. I was briefed generally on it, but I don't know what the intended outcome is.
Okay.
To provide something to council at some point. I'm not sure.
You have not heard that. Okay.
But I could come back at the next meeting with some.
Yeah. I think that would be useful if I want to rule out using the top part of the Pomfret Street Garage to meet your needs if there's already sort of a push to maybe repurpose it for something else that also meets increasing green roofs in the borough is one of our climate action goals. It would be useful to kind of rule that out to help your team to know that, if we're going to use Pomfret Street Garage, it's going to need to be at a different level. Yeah.
I know as of about a month ago, so it's finance director and the parking supervisor who are working through both the parking and the on-street parking and the parking garage issues. And they were somewhat taking the lead of the EV providers on what's going to be most convenient in the garage. I don't know that there's been a conclusion to that.
Okay.
To that, but they're also looking at which users are going to use that. We talked about it a bit before the meeting because the hotel leasing a number of lots and expecting there may be some significant use of EV chargers by the hotel, and I think they have the first portions of the first floor. So we may be sort of guided that way because those are going to be the most frequent users of EV chargers. I think we're working through that. But Jared may come back to us with new details since the last month.
I've heard, that thanks for the reminder. I was aware that. Is there any way to kind of make sure where they're at is connected with what David's team is doing? So just so that we're a little bit more. I mean, there's no reason for David to use one of his few members looking at something that's largely being kind of already looked at. So you can connect that work with David.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. And Jared, yeah, if you could kind of give an update of just how mature or not the look at the top of the parking garage is.
This is just the Pomfret Street garage you want to know about? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
right now.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that gets to that gets to the next question. I know this was actually, I think, on our my other sheet with updates, but I know, Sean, you were working, and maybe this is ongoing, at parking utilization rates of borough lots and public garage.
Yeah, I tried to get an update on that, but the person with the update is out sick. So
Okay.
I don't have anything new on that yet.
Would it be out of line to try to get a deadline for that, or?
There may already be a deadline. I'm not sure off the top of my head what that
Right.
is, but I'll check. And I'll let the group know.
I will update our chart here once we get a deadline for that, because I think that's a forcing function. That's a major input to where we go on that. So thank you. So engaging local residents, local residential, multifamily housing property owners. So we kind of just talked about that for about 20 minutes. I think we've come to a consensus in it. You know, we're going to have to work with some of these organization leads and kind of continue to build the networks. But in the meantime, I think the idea of moving forward with some pilot program with X number of projects that we'd be willing to consider is one I think we're all in favor of. And then I know, Dave, I'll let you update this, because I know this is in your report, but you have a lot of great ideas for reducing community vehicle miles traveled. I know Jared is working with the tri-region. Hopefully we'll be working with the tri-regional transportation group so that we can start really making progress on Safe Street program and making this a little bit more friendly community for pedestrians and bicyclists. I did actually have an informal discussion with Commissioner Fauci. There does seem to be some discussions about working with warehouse owners about solar, and there's some, I will call it, interpretations of effectively having a community solar project that could potentially work. My limited understanding was that we still don't have a state approved community solar option, but she seemed to indicate there may be some ways that we could effectively have a community solar project. And since we still don't have a decarbonization task force lead, I will follow up with her on that. I think I have reached out to the Carlisle area school district to let them know we do have some programs that could be good timing if they were looking at converting to EVs. I think most of their bus fleet now, though, is largely outsourced or contracted. So this kind of brings up another point that I will all of us is one of the responsibilities or one of the duties of our committee is to go back, just update the climate action plan every year. It's basically do an update. And I think we do have a couple of objectives that either maybe no longer fit, our ability to actually affect electrification of the school district is probably limited. So we might want to think about whether we want to keep some of the objectives we have on here or not. But I intend in the next few weeks to kind of go through and make some notes on the current climate action plan to have all of you to review, so that any changes we make and propose to council, we've gone through. But I would encourage all of you, for all of the things in the plan that have never quite sat well or never did sit well with you, start making some edits and start sending them my way. And
I'm not sure how to edit.
Oh, okay.
I get to Teams, but I can't seem to get to SharePoint.
I will.
Is there training?
Stephanie and I will work with you to make sure you have access to the right document to make comments in, and in the extreme thing, we can always make sure you have some version to edit until if and when we get you kind of situated with SharePoint. So you cannot get to the SharePoint landing page.
I can't tell if I can. I poke around.
Okay.
That's my approach to
Okay.
applications, and I haven't poked
Okay.
successfully yet.
Okay. Well, we'll continue to work on that. And then I was hoping this week a lot of our discussion would be on single-use plastic bag recommendation that Tamala is working on. She reached out to me and requested another month to work on that. I do know that Mayor Schultz and her and I did get a chance to talk about our potential recommendation, and to get a sense for how it would affect at least a subset of our businesses. Since our conversation, I think there's probably been 7 or 8 municipalities in Pennsylvania or businesses like Wegmans who have. This is a trend. This is something that is no longer, an exception, and it seems like the business community is realizing it's probably a question of when and not if that we're really going to have to transition away from single-use plastic bags. I hope next week this will be on the agenda item, and then we'll have a read ahead for everyone to talk about, and it will be in the template format it'll be the first formal recommendation that we're using. I've urged her to keep it to a 2-page, basically, policy analysis with a recommendation, and then that will be basically the basis of our deliberation. So more to come on that. And I think the only other, let's see here, look at issue tracker. Yeah, I think I've made updates on all these issues. Okay. That's it for me. Let's turn it over to our task force lead, Mitch. Any updates for the group?
Sure. So we've been, first updates on what we've done. So we had a really great focus group right after last meeting. I think the Gazette really helped quite a bit in terms of getting. I think it was 16 people at the last focus group, so it wasn't like overwhelming, but it was a good number because it was sort of like it was enough so that everybody could kind of speak and people didn't feel spoken over top of. So that we didn't have as many at the next one, but I think the sort of the closeness of the release of the Gazette really helped with that. We're trying to work with sort of the more commercial aspects of Carlisle or the plan, and I've been having Bob Ackerman, one of our team members, reach out to realtors, the Carlisle, I guess there's a Carlisle Realtors Association, the Chamber of Commerce, and the DCA. We kind of it's been a little bit tricky trying to schedule with them, and I think it's been a bit, it's been a bit hard to kind of grease the wheels with that. So I'm not sure if there's any sort of suggestions. We've tried. We've allocated a little bit of money to sort of provide some food, and we tried to figure out if we can kind of bake cookies and stuff like that for the focus groups, but it's been a bit difficult trying to organize a meeting with any of them. So hopefully those will work out. Aside from that, on the 24th during Harvest of the Arts, we'll be at Ejecta Projects, which is downtown. It's an art gallery, and we'll be sort of doing a collaborative e-bike build with Lifecycle and the Carlisle Tool Library. And Hans Pfister will be there sort of explaining how to build an e-bike. We'll be assembling it behind the gallery, so you can just kind of walk on in through the gallery, take a look at things, and then we'll be out back building the e-bike. We might have be sharing the table out front with Ejecta too, just sort of talking to people passing by. So we're really looking forward to that. We're also trying to work on trying to come up with some sort of. We're about to release our sort of mini grant application. We were hoping to do that at one of the focus groups with the Chamber of Commerce or the Downtown Carlisle Association, but it just sort of has been difficult planning a meeting with them. And then we're also trying to think about how we could have some sort of sustainable business certification that kind of highlights different aspects of businesses that relate to sustainability and reduced emissions, such as waste, greenhouse gas emissions, sustainable options, things of that nature. So it's sort of still in the brainstorming phase right now, but that was another thing we were hoping to kind of bring up at our focus group with some of the commercial entities in Carlisle. So
this would be our own lead, self sort of defined recognition, or would it be to a more recognizable standard?
That's sort of what we're trying to figure out. We haven't really kind of, I think. We're still sort of figuring that out. If there's another sort of model we can just sort of cut and paste, or if there's something that maybe might be more unique to Carlisle, but still convey all the same information. So that's sort of where we're at.
All right, thanks, Mitch. Tony?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I'm going to be kind of consulting the group doing the local greenhouse gas government operations greenhouse gas inventory. So I'm looking forward to talking with those students a bit more. The second thing would be, you sent me some data on municipal waste and the change of the trash collection program, and we're going to be kind of looking into what the emissions implications of that are, which will be tricky. But I've started surveying some of the literature on that, which is also a difficult thing to do, because it's a hard kind of causal question to ask in terms of when you change how trash is collected, what actually happens to waste generation. But I will keep looking into that. The next step then is that, as we develop some of these programs more completely, I'll collaborate on these kind of implementation plans and how we can monitor reductions going forward for there. So that's I have kind of a working document that has been existed for a while there, and once we can kind of apply that to a particular project, we'll have a better sense for it, and we can kind of have a more universal template, I think, that we can use to monitor different programs. So that's what I want to get to, where we have a kind of an assessment template that we can use, likely in modified form, for several different projects, and have the types of data we have access to, the type of data we can get once we implement. So, work in progress.
Thank you. And Carla.
So we are still working on the energy efficiency multifamily housing program. I think we've kind of decided it really ought to be designed pretty close to the state program that is out of money. Might as well just use that same template, but just, looking for funds from that perspective. Sean Pressman was having trouble identifying buildings that he could, get in with to make these improvements. I guess we just need to find a different way of doing that. When we asked the county for information about the housing, the assisted housing, the Section 8 housing, and all of that, it's a privacy issue there as well. So it might just be us putting together something, giving it to them, and asking them to disseminate it on some level. The other thing that I found was on ArcGIS, there's all kinds of information that probably shouldn't be public, but is about built addresses with assisted housing and things like that. So I'll put that list together and just see what we can get from that. And it probably just nailing down exactly what it is that this program is going to do for people, because I have to assume that there's people out there that we can help, but until, it's sort of the same thing as this EV, which comes first. So we just need to be able to explain to people what this program is and what it's going to do for them. And I think we'll find some people that would be interested in it. So.
Yeah, I do know that the IRA has a lot of federal funds set aside for low and medium income energy efficiency projects, and I think they'll end up being standalone block grants just for that. So this is a topic that we really I think we just need to understand a little better about what the best ways of working with our utilities are to, and with the housing authority, is to identify the best locations, the most suitable locations for this, because this is going to be, we're going to be doing this in the future, and just the Engineer Pressman was, by the way, Sean is the point of contact at PPL, who's in charge of their energy efficiency programs, but were people just not responding to his queries, as you're understanding, or when he said he couldn't really find the right?
Yeah, I mean,
is that more of it?
Everything, he would call somebody or talk to them, and they just, wouldn't respond, or so there was a lot of it. Some of it was just trying to find out who to contact, and when he did, he wasn't getting anywhere. So it was in an email. I don't know if you got that one or not.
Yeah.
It was on August 30th.
Okay. Yeah, that's a little concerning. I know he was wanting to focus on larger complexes, but maybe maybe we can find a way to reach out to some of these landlords.
Well,
perhaps if we can get some specific ones where he would particularly like maybe 3 or 4 complexes that he would really, that to him and for the goals that he has, Act 129 requirements, that we can get someone on staff to reach out to the landlord and say, hey, we're trying to work with the utility to do something that we think would be be mutually beneficial to you and your tenants. If we need to do that, we will, and we just need to get some more specificity from him.
yeah. So the borough has started to register people's rental properties too. So hopefully that will give us a place to start.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, this is a what we're trying to do is actually complements, and I think it would be useful for landlords to utilize to potentially help meet some of their code considerations. So if you could ask Sean to identify a handful of the more promising ones, we can make sure that borough staff can reach out to the landlords.
Okay.
Thanks. Dave?
We've talked about most of the projects that the Transportation Task Force has been thinking about and will continue to develop. The one that I'd like to address briefly and get your ideas is near-term efforts to reduce vehicle miles traveled. Jared just told me that the county has submitted a grant application for safe streets, and the borough has endorsed that as part of the application. And that's a longer-term process of perhaps getting a grant for regional planning, and then gradually over the years getting to changing traffic directions and street crossings and the heavy lifting of particularly the construction of infrastructure. The near term, the project that we're going to try to define for near-term efforts is establishing and enforcing speed limits, education of vehicular and non-vehicular users of the infrastructure, use of the avenues, which keeps coming up as an interesting idea. And I've had a couple of ideas that I'd like to suggest we might develop. One is to, they're both to do some demonstration projects, which would be part of the education program, educating both vehicular and non-vehicular users. One might be to coordinate with the school district on a bike-to-school program as a demonstration program, something that would perhaps actually close a portion of Bedford Street, one of the lanes or Bedford Street down between the elementary school and the middle school, and for the times of day when the kids are moving, and then perhaps we still have police on bikes, the regular pedal bikes. Okay, So maybe even get.
Well, actually, I want to make an editorial comment about that. It has been and tends to be the police department wanting to use bikes. I think it's critically important for a number of reasons, but I think it actually is useful for our police to, and it gets to one of your points, to actually be riding around on bikes to see just how nervous it is to be in certain locations and to appreciate what that feels like, and then whether that plays out in like enforcement and being more sensitive to bicyclists in certain areas. I think there's real benefits in getting to your point in the police being in the modes of transportation that we need to protect. So I'm glad you brought that up.
I'll be just a little bit flippant and say they should be not in plain clothes, because if they're in police uniforms, the drivers are going to behave very differently. But anyway, but
police uniforms to ride their bikes.
or that's it. That's the other idea.
Yeah,
very, very interesting. But anyway, so that's a potential that might. I'm not hearing anybody say, "Oh my God, don't do that." So we'll continue to develop some ideas. The other is to do not bike to school, but just sort of a demo ride. A few months ago, I think, Mitch, you may have been involved up at Alliance Church. The Dickinson had a.
I wasn't involved in it from like a organizing standpoint, but I did
But
participate.
you rode in it.
Yeah, I participated in it.
And the street was closed, I believe, right?
I don't know, actually. Certain streets were blocked for the event, but I don't know if like any street was absolutely closed for it.
Well, the point is that a demonstration should demonstrate sharing the road, and so that's another thing that I've got in mind. And we have a member of the task force who is a rabid bicyclist and well experienced in riding in urban traffic. So I don't hear any objections. So we're going to develop some ideas and bring them to you, Joel. And
that's great. I encourage that for everyone, task force leaders and just members. This committee is a little bit different than a lot of the committees here in the sense that we are not presented things to vote on or consider. We're a planning function, and as such, we are a bit unique. We're advisory, but the council is clear in our. Oh, by the way, that's an update. As the other thing, we are officially been approved by council to continue operating as a committee. That was a bit of an administrative thing, but it was our solicitor reminded us that our original resolution was really only for a year. In our charter, our direction, it does specifically say we are to provide programs for consideration, and that makes us very different than other committees. And it's not just I am, as the chair, I'm dependent on you all to provide these options, and ultimately it's for council to consider moving forward or not. But none of you should feel second guess anything that your teams or you personally think would contribute and be worthy of consideration for council. Most of the good ideas are going to come from you. They're not going to be top down. So appreciate these are some great ideas you have on the VMT objective. I love it. Thanks.
Just briefly, on where were we at on the Pomfret Street garage, or the parking garages and public lots generally? Just in terms of overall thing. One thing I wanted to just bring up is I know the most recent funding cycle for the DEP level 2 charging grants, the charging PA forward, is that right? Driving PA forward grant cycle just opened July 28th, I believe. There's like $9 million in that program. A lot of it is still left. And I was just poking through some of their awarded grants on their website. You know, like the Allentown Parking Authority just got $90,000 and installed 20 EV charging stations all over the city in different garages and funded it through this. And the Allentown Parking Authority is who applied. So,
Could you share a link with that to both Dave and I? Since we're going to be sort of trying. I assume that's open to private entities as well, or is that just for?
It is open to
just about everybody.
Just about everybody. They have different funding structures, whether it's networked and fully publicly available, or in a multifamily unit, or a private business that's only open for certain hours a day. But I mean, the funding structure is, up to, if it's full public access and networked in our county, which I think is not a priority county, an environmental justice county, up to 60% of total project costs. I think would be the category we would be in if we were putting it in a public garage.
We actually have two projects that are evolving. One is Pomfret Street Garage as a demonstration, and the other is other borough lots
So I guess what I'm saying is I think this funding structure would allow us to lump all of those into one grant and say we're going to put a couple of chargers here, a couple of chargers here. It looks like that's what Allentown did.
I would think so.
Could all be into the same grant.
I will have a full report in October. Staff's working on that and should have a meeting the week of the 26th this month. I just got this update during the meeting. And so by our next meeting, I'd certainly have a full update on that. Our 2022 budget included 32,000, I forget how much, to explore these initiatives, and our 23 budget will have additional funds, so we'll be able to look at that in those matching funds. Is that a rolling grant? I imagine it's a rolling grant program.
It looks like. I was trying to kind of figure that part out. The best I can discover is that the current application period opened July 28th and remains open continuously as long as funds remain.
What do they call the program?
I'm just looking. This is their official Level 2 EV charging rebate program, a driving PA forward funding program from DEP.
Okay, I'll make sure that's on the radar too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
There's another program called AFIG, Alternative Fuels Initiative Grant, and that's for fleets, and that's another project here a fleet consists of 2 Class 1 and 2 or 10 Class 3 and above, I think, vehicles. And we're doing some initial thoughts, and then we'll turn them over to possibly you, Jared, to see if it works to pursue an AFIG grant.
Great.
Appreciate that, Dave. Your task force is really thinking some really great thoughts. I did encourage them, and I think David probably appreciate any other ideas, but we should look at like non-financial ways of incenting, even through our parking policies, that go beyond, just having a park. There's plenty of interesting things we can do to incentivize people having battery electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids. That isn't just, having an EV charger there, but in the DC area, they had a lot of research was done to show that the primary incentive for people in the DC area was not the $7,500, it was the driving in the HOV lanes. So these are non-financial, I think we have a huge huge potential to encourage that in other ways, and I look forward to hearing what your team comes up with. So, yeah, appreciate it. Good update. Thanks, Jared. Huh? Sean, you have anything to share with the team?
I think I've already covered everything throughout the meeting, so I'm good.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Good discussion. I will just say that, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, I think that pretty much secures our relevance for a number of years to come. I mean, there's, everyone here understands environmental importance of what we're doing, but I mean, from a infrastructure and from a business development point of view, there's a lot of decisions that we're in a position to help council think through, and it's going to be with us for years to come, whether it's focusing on energy efficiency and energy injustice, to the transportation transition. We have to be the ones really keeping borough staff and council in the know to make decisions. And I know it's really challenging, as you all are volunteers, but your work is vitally important and is going to be increasingly so. Just wanted to make sure that the federal government has finally stepped up after years of not doing, I think, what was sufficient, and now it's incumbent on us to be smart and make good use of our taxpayer money. So, if that nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks.